Welcome. You listen to 360 Info. I'm your host, Hamptonio. What you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you've been told of yourself. Yes, I think that probably sunk in the last 3 years. We've been saying that also. But, it's ever so important that we keep talking about what you've been told of yourself is how you think of yourself. And it is a dreary day in Cleveland. It is Saturday morning, but it's Cleveland, Vince. And I know you're going to tell me how much sunshine you had.
You're absolutely
Just go ahead and rub it in and let us have it, yeah?
Well, it was a beautiful time. I spent that time with my feet on the beach in the sand, looking up at the sky and the waves, and I saw some dolphins. There were jellyfish that were beached and crabs, and saw all kinds of things. It was a beautiful experience, but it was back to reality. I was on the road last night, and as soon as I got into Ohio, guess what? It started raining, and it got cold all of a sudden. Woke up this morning, 43 degrees and cloudy. But hey, there's always next week, and we will absolutely see a change. So we will welcome that. But yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to be recharged and jumping right back into things. So first, before we introduce our guest, I would like to just mention to folks that we do have a full-time sales department, and that is Brother Stephen E. Boyd, and he has been making some moves in the past few weeks. We're going to be welcoming some new sponsors relatively soon, but we don't want you to miss out on your opportunity to become a sponsor. So if you have a business or something that you need to promote, you need to give him a call, and you can reach him at 216-526-1297. That's 216-526-1297. Reach out to Stephen E. Boyd. Our guest this morning on 360 Info Network is Lennie Chism. He's actually a native of Canton, Ohio, and a graduate, I believe, of Ohio State University, but somehow he ended up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we're going to talk about what it is or what it's like to live there in Minneapolis right now, considering the things that are going on. But in addition to that, he is an entrepreneurial activist, and he's also a radio talk show host. And there are a few other things that we might uncover in our conversation today. Welcome to 360 Info Network, Brother Lennie Chism.
Well, thanks for having me on your radio show. I'm glad you were able to make it back from all of that bliss you were in to have me speak with you.
Yes.
I don't know if I'd have been able to get on the road if I had enjoyed all of that good stuff, man.
My brother, I was really thinking about taking another week, but I just have some things that I have to attend to up here. So I am back, and I am here to welcome you to the show. So you're living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and you're an entrepreneurial activist. Tell us what that means.
Well, I got to Minneapolis after I graduated from Ohio State University. Yeah, I know you said Ohio State, but I got to put the D in front of it. That's the traditional thing that we have to always say. Ohio State University. After I got out of college in '83, because I watched a movie that Prince was in. I should have never watched that movie. Man. I don't know what was wrong with me. But I thought this was the place to be in 1983. So after that, when I got in '88, when I got out of school, I said, hey, I'm moving to Minneapolis. And all my friends were moving to Atlanta at the time. And that was the mecca at that point. Atlanta was hiring a lot of black folks. They were hearing a lot of things, and they were moving to Atlanta. I said, the last place I want to go is where I know it might not be a job.
Okay.
So I got a job here in Minneapolis.
Lennie, I have to interrupt for a second because your phone is kind of muffled. Is there any adjustment that you can make to clear up the sound?
Does this sound better?
Yeah, that sounds a little bit better. We're just having a little difficulty hearing you, and we don't want to miss any of that important information.
No problem. I just change my headset a little bit for you, if that works for you. If not, I can,
That's much better.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I got to Minneapolis. And as I've been here, I've worked for various corporations and entrepreneurial experiences. But the real gist of it is I wanted to find ways to help my folks become economically independent. And I thought the first way to do that is I have to prove it to myself first. and been doing that for a number of years. So I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'd like to call it, trying a lot of different things, different strategies from public sector to private sector.
Could you give us some insight on what some of those things may have been or what they are?
Well, the first thing I did was I published something called my real first entrepreneurial shot was the Twin Cities Black Pages, which was a listing of Black-owned businesses, which was also supported by major corporations before they changed the rules really for supporting Black businesses. And at that time, that was the big thing. It was print. So we did a lot of print for 5 years, and they was using that publication to help recruit more people here to the Twin Cities from the major Black colleges and universities around the country. And that was also, at one point, the Cleveland had a Black Pages as well. I'm not sure if it still exists, but we had a network of Black Pages around the country that we were producing. And the main gist of it was similar to the Green Book years ago, the Green Book, which was out to try to help people recirculate their dollars, particularly when they come to areas where they have no reference of what's Black-owned and what's not Black-owned. And then that was the first one. But I used my computer experiences and my graphic experiences to put that publication out on the street. And when you do print, as you probably know, print has to tie in with a lot of things. And at that time, there was no such thing as offset. Offset printing was the only way to go. We didn't have the 3D printers that could print graphics, print a whole book now in color. So that was back when, during that time in the early 90s. So since then, print has changed and models changed, advertising has changed. And so I did it for about 5 years. And the reason I stopped doing it more or less was because it's like the Yellow Pages. Once you print it, it becomes obsolete pretty quick. And most people weren't throwing it away. So a lot of businesses that were in there the first edition, by the time I got to the third edition, had soon left. And it was actually starting to harm the advertising, the Black business market, because people were saying, oh, they're out of business, I can't find this, I can't find that. Because the failure rate for businesses within the first 5 years is so high. And so when we stopped doing that, then I would work for the airlines here, who was at that time, Northwest Airlines, worked for them, writing computer programs, and flew all around the country and the world for a number of years. Then I did real estate. So I went to 2008, 2010. I was doing real estate rehab, reconstruction, rebuilding. And the thing that hurt that market was when the foreclosure crisis hit. So in 2008, when that started to happen, a lot of homes that we were selling, just simply, the market just stopped, just went completely flat. And there was nothing we could do, so then that moved me on to my next career as an electrician.
Okay. So you're managing that, and you're also managing a talk show. Tell us about the talk show and how folks can access it if they can.
It's called Financial Fitness. It's we talk about the basics of finances. We talk about the how Black folks can change it. It's on the local radio station here, KMOJ 89.9 FM, and you can go to the web and you can access it there. It's KMOJFM.com. And it hosted with another young lady named Nika Constantino, and I co-host that with her. And we really try to focus on strategies to help whichever segment you're in your financial situation, whether you're coming from ground zero or you move to the point where you need to figure out how to grow your 401k. So we talk about that often. And we also talk about some of the basic things in our community which we can do to change our buying patterns to help us achieve group economics as part of our strategy for growth.
Okay.
Just a question here. I was just wondering, when we talk, we're going back to the Black Pages and talking about the business, and we've been talking about that forever, all the way back to Elijah, and you can go further on to Marcus Garvey about supporting our business, and that always seemed to be an issue in the African-American community. For this question for the both of you, I just know what I hear out here in the streets. What is the major concern or issues that most people have about African-Americans about supporting African-American businesses? And then I have a follow-up to that, because I kind of know what your answer is going to be to a degree.
Okay, we'll take the answer when we return from our break. It's 11:15 on 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is Lennie Chism, entrepreneurial activist and radio talk show host in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll be right back right after these messages. We're back. AM 1490 WERE 360 Info Network. Hamptonio and Vince Robinson, with our guest, Mr. Lennie Chism, who is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as we speak. The question before the break was, why don't black people do business with black businesses? Hamptonio knows how I feel about it, so I'm going to give you the first shot at that question.
All right. Well, let me use an analogy. I love barbecue. I love barbecue food. I love, Southern food, but I also love other varieties of food. And if a lot of times when there was a restaurant here, and he was a very good restaurant, very good, and people would go to his restaurant, and when they came out, they would say, he was soul food. He said, they would say, "Oh, I can do better than that. I can do better than that." That's the kiss of death for a black business, because when people come out and say they can do better than that, yes, you can cook better. You might have add a little more salt. You might do this and might do that. But you're not running a business where every spoonful of butter dictates whether you're profitable or you're going to have a loss. And you're not serving customers. So a lot of times we're our own worst enemies by that type of next person marketing. And I think that's because I'm not sure if it's personal envy but just to use that restaurant analogy, it's hard for us to keep that momentum when people come out and say those things. And then if it's not a cliquish spot where people start to develop long-term memories of things they've done, they've celebrated anniversaries, they've had engagements, they've had birthday parties there, those things make it also able for the businesses to survive long-term. And then if you know the service industry, we're always competing with other services that are cheaper. If you're selling products, there's always we don't get the same products that are offered at the major corporation. And then there's always the factors of we're shopping to get the best price, and the best price may not even be close to what the small business can buy it at. So a lot of factors go into it, but the biggest one is that we may not have enough disposable income to support a lot of our businesses as well.
Okay, so it's an income thing. I also noticed that in some ways we don't respect each other the way we respect others. So, Hamptonio uses the phrase, the white man's ice is colder than our ice, and I think that's part of it. It's just that whole idea of perception, and it's, our relationships with each other because we don't treat each other the way we should. I had an experience in a restaurant a few weeks ago, and, the restaurant business is a challenging business, especially here in Cleveland. And one of the biggest issues that we have in our restaurant business is customer service. And, it just seems as though we dropped the ball because we don't have enough respect for each other to deliver the things that we should deliver to each other. So it could be a cultural affectation. I know in the village, when you're vending and you're selling something, and I've been to Africa, so I know when they give you a price, you always say, well, how about this? And so there's an attempt to negotiate a different price. But there's also that thing called the cost of doing business. So for me, as a photographer, for instance, if I charge $150 for headshots, that price is based on what it costs to be able to deliver that product. So when somebody comes into my studio and I say the price is $150 and that covers this hour, they say, well, what if we only take a half hour? Well, that's not going to work, because you're going to be there for an hour, and it's going to take me 3 hours to produce that product for you, potentially. So, we don't respect each other enough to say, if your price is your price, that's the price, and I'm willing to pay it. But when you go to the white folks, they give you the price, and you say, okay, and you pay it. So some of it to me, it just boils down to price, and it boils down to respect.
Yeah. If I can interject one more small piece to that, I manufactured and marketed detergent for a number of years under my private label marketing. But the number one detergent in our community is Tide. And Tide actually and that's Procter & Gamble, which is right out of Cleveland, Ohio. Cincinnati, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Procter & Gamble. So when I walk in and I show them my detergent, and I say, hey, here's something you can try. First thing they would say is it going to hurt my skin? And I'd be like, did you ask that question of Tide, or did you just use it? Man, that's a straight question. I said, did you ask that question of Tide? Have you ever just, looked at Tide and said, should I be concerned about my skin? You just put that laundry cap, which, by the way, is way more than you need for a load of clothes. And they would just do it blindly because their grandmother did it, or their mother did it, or their friend did it. So when you introduce a new product to them, it's the same concepts, is that, should I trust a black man who's selling a detergent? Well, the detergents are determined by the municipality. You can't put certain things in detergent because it has to go in the water system. So all detergent is the same except for fragrance and color.
Right. But
when they see it coming from a black man, there would be all those questions. But however, when I sold to the Nigerian market and the market from the continent of Africa, I had no problem. That was a good market for me. But getting it into the mainstream market and on the store shelf, so the main, like a Kroger's and stuff like that, they would not accept the black product. They wouldn't do it. So we also have to have access to marketplaces where people are frequent shoppers to succeed as well. Okay. That's just one of the many aspects of trying to do business. We got to have access to mass consumers to really succeed.
Yeah, that's a great concept. Hamptonio, you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, and that tends to be the norm when people really kind of speaks about customer service, as being some of a major issue. I hope and I think, by talking, people are trying to maybe, come to grips of understanding that, we have to do this and we have to support our businesses and we have to support each other in order to survive as a community, because we all know that's one of the number one issues. Claude Anderson, drills down and home with that, all the time, the need for us to be a community and not a neighborhood. But, to me personally, until we get to the point of understanding that, and set up some type of system to where if we do have issues with a business, that we can go in and talk to that business and try to work with them so we can continue to support the business. And one of the things, in closing, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I put it out there before about a year or so ago, 2 years ago on the radio show, is starting a kind of consumer type of business to where we train folks that are usually at the counters and stuff like that, how to deal with consumer issues, consumer complaints, and them to understand the importance of customer service, where they go through customer service scenarios and learn how to deal with them, how to manage them, and understand the importance of folks walking through that door, for them as far as getting the job is concerned. And then you farm those particular graduates to some of our local businesses out there so they can, go with certificates and to know that they've been trained. Because a lot of times our business owners are first-generation business owners, and they're struggling and trying to make it happen, so they may falter at some of these particular skills. So we had a business that we can farm out and teach, because that seems to be the major concern. So we need to do something about that. That's one of the ways of doing something about that, because most people always complain about customer service.
Well, it's a reality of doing business with black businesses sometimes, but we can't say that all black businesses fail to deliver. I think that's the other part of it. And it's gratifying to hear from you, Lennie, that you were able to navigate that landscape with the Nigerians, because, again, one of the things that we talk about on this show all the time is the need for us to be transcontinental, to be around the world, and to be doing business with our brothers and sisters on the other side of the globe. I want to go back to what you spoke about in terms of the Black Pages, or that iteration of it that you had there in Minneapolis, and ask you what was your pivot point? What did you do to adapt to the challenges of the realities that many businesses don't succeed after a relatively short period of time? And, there's the fact that information gets stale rather quickly. How do you adapt and adjust to that?
Well, you have to be That's a great question, because literally you have to be agile. You have to be flexible. You have to be willing to change your strategies. You're not Titanic. You have to move a lot quicker than that. The concept was, I then went around the country, and I remember at that time they were doing the Black Expos. There was a really big thing of doing Black Expos around the country. So we incorporated the Black Expo as part of our marketing stream of bringing money in. So we did that a couple times a year. And here's a unique thing that I ran across with the Black Expo, was that the Black Expo had to be done in an event center, and the event center would have exclusive catering contracts. So we couldn't even bring a black business in to sell hot dogs because of the catering contracts that the convention center had put in place, that we wouldn't allow us to do that. But one of the cultural things was we had to be able to bring in people, and they would be there all day. They would have to eat, and the only thing we could offer them for food was whatever concessionaires would do. So those are things that they put in place to protect their businesses, even when they're not at the table. That catering contract. By the way, I remember I brought in, I'm not sure if you remember, a group called the Rude Boys out of Cleveland.
Yes.
I brought them in as entertainers, and because they were at that time, they were a hot group. And so little things like that is what really you have to do, is you have to continue to try to do marketing and change up your selection. And at that time, we had to use the basics. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. There was no such thing as Twitter, and there was no such thing as Facebook. So we had to do all of our marketing without that. And you couldn't run around and make phone calls because there was no cell phone. So you had to be local and go back to your office all the time. So you have to be really agile and adaptive to make it work.
Mm-hmm. One of the deficits that you identified in your early comments is lack of knowledge. And we had a conversation prior to this radio program, and I think we were in full agreement about the fact that people don't know what they need to know in order for us to be successful. We talk a lot about entrepreneurism on this radio program, and specifically we talk about Black entrepreneurism. And I'm just wondering, knowing that you have the platform that you have, what are some of the results that you're getting from you being one who shares information and encouragement for people to get involved in the world of business?
Well, what I try to do with it, and what we try to do with it, I'll bring a business on. I like to bring a business on so they can tell us their experiences. I like to have them talk about, just like what we're doing now, talk about their successes and talk about their failures. I've never failed at a business. I've learned from my mistakes of doing business, but I've never failed. And so that would translate to the next opportunity. Or at some point, every business runs across where they run out of that their selling platform. They can't sell anymore because either more people come to the marketplace or not. So I'm always trying to get people to hear the stories of the small business owner. The business owner that sells the barbecue, the business owner that sells the furniture, the ones that sell the clothing, the ones that even cut hair. They talk about, well, the marketplace changed for our hair because we could no longer sell in the hood, where we like to have our beauty barber salons and things like that. We had to move out to the suburban malls where people were going. We had to move into areas where we were not as welcomed, but we needed to be there because our customers had moved there. And that's the things that we literally try to do, is try to get people to tell the story. And through those stories, we hope to have others be willing to take the risk. Because regardless of whether you're green, black, blue, brown, or polka dot, if you go out there and you put your feet in this water, it's going to be rough. It's not going to be easy. You're not going to have the capital that you want. I never had enough money. I'm always running out of money. I never had enough access. I'm always going to run out. I've got to create those roads every day. And that's what I try to really get them to say to them. You got to be willing to take that risk. Go out there with your friends, and then your friends have to be willing to say, I'm going to give them a shot. If my friend has an auto business, I'm going by there at least once a year. If my friends have a grocery store, I'm going by there at least once a year. I'm gonna make it part of my flow. But here's one that used to get me in corporate America. If I can get just a few more seconds, if I ask for a referral in corporate America from one of my black friends, and this was consistent, they will refer me to a white customer, a white business.
Mm-hmm.
If they ask me, I would refer them to a black business. And if I ask a white person, they will refer me to a white business. So who's even referring black people to black people? That was one that classic. I said, hey, man, do you know any black businesses that I can go get a haircut at when I first got to Minneapolis? A lot of them couldn't tell me where to go because they were not using it. So they were going to businesses that were in their area, which might not have been because they had enough income to live in various places. They would go to the nearest white business. So that's some of the factors that I try to talk about on the show, is that we have to get those businesses to talk about how they build their customer base and what it takes to sustain it.
This question too, but I mean, this statement, we all know, again, in order for us to survive, we have to support each other, and we also have to change our state of mind from being, a consumer to actually being business owners. And I'm wondering, and maybe even from our schools, teaching our kids, yes, graduate from college and work for somebody, and take that particular knowledge and go to the next level. One of my economists, Devin, that did the beauty supply situation, talked about maybe only like 3% of people who go to college start their own business. So as Dr. Amos Wilson said, we can't solve this problem, being a consumer. So how do we start making, that transition from consumerism to actually entrepreneurism, because, you go to these countries, they don't have no other, way of doing it, but get out there hustling and selling. So we can do it. It's in our blood. But have we been loyal to this consumer state of mind, in this country, and it's hard for us to break that mold and patronizing everybody and our dollar turning over a few hours and leaving the community. What we need to do is set up to start, breaking that system, that mental system down.
Well, if I can jump into that question, I think the first one is I don't recommend any kid go to college anymore. I don't recommend that. And the reason I say that is that I took that traditional route. My mother really wanted me to be. I'm the first college graduate, first high school graduate. The first. I got so many firsts. I'm like, okay, I don't run out of first. The question is, what do you do in our community that allows us to build our community? And we had our earlier conversation before the show, I mentioned how the foreclosure market changed our communities tremendously. And we are not the builders of our community. So we got to go from the ground zero, from the land, from the dirt, up from the dirt building. And that's what they did with the Black Wall Streets. They built it in the dirt. And the dirt became so valuable it was destroyed by others who wanted the dirt. They wanted the land that the Black Wall Street had. It went from not something that was acceptable and lovely to something that they wanted. There's a case in California now where it was beachfront property, $75 million. They took it from the family. They're looking at ways of giving it back to the family now through legislation and the city council there. So that destroyed generations. So we have to learn how to build more so than we do anything else we got to build. In D.C. right now, they're changing the waterfront. I used to love to go to D.C. and go to some of the spots on the waterfront. Well, D.C. is no longer the dark country, as they used to call it, back in the day, Chocolate City.
Chocolate City.
Yeah, it's changed because the way that they restructuring. Marion Barry did a lot for D.C. in the concept of using government money and government ideas to build. Marion Barry's left, and now we're seeing things that should not be occurring in D.C. We should not see the businesses being displaced the way we are. But they have no choice because the redevelopers are coming in there. So again, we have to be able to build our infrastructure. And the reason the DC is has such a unique place to go is because of the disposable income provided by all the black people who work for the largest employer of black people, our government. They have the money to support the business. That's why we are seeing the busboys and poets and the JoJos and all those other businesses, because they can be supported by the black dollars. Because if you go to a restaurant and you buy a drink in D.C., whether it's a pop or alcoholic, it's going to cost you $10. Well, how many drinks can you buy if your income can't support disposable income of $10 a drink? So those are things that I think, to get back to your question, we got to develop that from the ground up. And how we do that is always the toughest part, when we don't have people who can go in with backhoes and build, bricklayers, and architects a lot of times got to design it. We got to develop what we want from the ground up. And Cleveland is a classic example. A lot of foreclosure houses, the neighborhoods changed. Who's rebuilding that in Cleveland? And how much money are we capturing through the rebuilding process? That's just a few insights to help us get to where you're talking about an economy that supports itself.
I want to return to the comment that you made about not advising people to go to college, because I'm just mindful of the fact that one of the richest people on this planet, and one of the richest people on the planet who is having a major impact on everyone's lives, is a person named Bill Gates. And as far as I know, he did not get a college degree. Look at the impact that he's making. So the other thing that I would think of is the fact that in many ways, colleges are just training grounds for slave debt. So you get the college degree, you have a whole lot of college loan debt because you couldn't afford the expensive university that you went to that was supposed to give you this advantage in life. And you end up living the rest of your life serving the debt that you've created because you went to college. So the very important point to make there. But I want to pivot to what you were mentioning about profit from loss. And when we talk about profit from loss, I'm talking about what happens when that house gets torn down, what happens when those windows on the business get broken because there was an insurrection or a riot, whichever term you want to choose. And that is something that happened in Minneapolis following the death of George Floyd and the repercussions that happened around the country and literally around the planet. Talk to us about what happened in Minneapolis a year ago and how certain people profited from the event that took place.
Man, you just opened up a big can of worms there, brother. I used to tell people the only way we're going to change Minneapolis is they burn it down. I said, you're going to have to burn this place down to make change. And that was a statement I made. I never expected to see it in my lifetime, but that's what they did. But here's the problem. When they burned it down, the city controlled how they rebuilt it. They control that through City Hall, and they've been controlling it for years. So if I got to go down to City Hall and get a building permit to remove the debris, we're talking the debris from a destructed building, that's a problem. Because City Hall already certified the businesses that they would allow to move the debris. And so the first thing you got to get is a permit to remove the debris. So our businesses, we may not have a dump truck. We got very few brothers own pickups, by the way. So they ain't even able to carry, pickup loads of debris out. So the people that made the money are the ones who had some dump trucks, some backhoes, some bobcats, all the people that, that's why I don't encourage colleges anymore, because 9 out of 10 students are never going to get a college degree. So what do? What the other 9 kids do? They generally get jobs on another level. And let's say he's a big, strong kid and he has very limited capacity as far as his knowledge. He's going to get a job as a laborer somewhere or a tradesman. So we don't have enough of those in our community. So again, the people who are profiting from the debris are the ones that we are now seeing becoming millionaires because they're rebuilding the city. And just like when the World Trade Center fell down, there was 16 acres of land that had to be redeveloped in New York. Do you know what the price of 16 acres of land in New York would be, given the number and the density of New York? that's phenomenal. That was like, man, I got gold. We had a bridge that fell up here. So George Floyd was the big bridge. And that bridge should be to new growth and economic opportunities. However, it didn't pan out that way because the contractors don't have that type of capacity in many ways. There were a few who did contractor administration who were profiting, but the average black laborer did not get a job removing the debris. So where do we go from there? That's the thing that I like to say is that money, George Floyd, rest his soul, changed the concept. He was a catalyst. But man, the people that are making the money, Home Depot, making a killing because you had to go get a 3/4 inch plywood to put up there. So when you bought the plywood, you had to buy screws. You had to buy batteries to put for the drills. You had the portable drills. You had to buy generators. All of those things just to put up a board on a window. So those companies are the ones that are really doing well from George Floyd's death. And then the overtime pay for all the security people, all the police officers. We have a police officer on the line. How many black police officers do you think Minneapolis has? Black state troopers, black security services. All of those people now became in high demand. We had people protecting the hospitals who were basically brought in. They were making $65 an hour, 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, just to protect some of the infrastructure that's already there, the hospitals, the colleges, and so on. That's who made the money off of George Floyd's death. Now, we have this same situation occurred every place around the country. In Cleveland, in Baltimore, anywhere they were having riots or rebellions or disturbances, however you want to call it. That destruction leads to money.
Yes. Very important point to make, and we will revisit that subject when we return. You're listening to 360 Info Network on AM 1490 WERE with Hamptonio and Vince Robinson. Our guest this morning is Lennie Chism. He is an entrepreneurial activist, radio talk show host, and he's got some passions about black folks empowering themselves. And we're going to talk about one of the ways that you can empower yourself today economically when we come back. We'll be right back. We're back. 360 Info Network on AM 1490 WERE. If you're not listening on Facebook, you miss out on the things that we talk about during the break. And we just had a very interesting conversation. Just going back to what we were talking about before we took this break, I revealed the epiphany that I have about what's going on the east side of Cleveland. So you have these homes that are being torn down, and the cost of tearing the house down could actually be reinvested into restoring that property. But Brother Lennie, you had some very interesting perspectives on that. Would you care to share them with the listening audience? Sure.
I appreciate you bringing that conversation into it. When we tear down houses, the thing about during the foreclosure crisis, they tore down a tremendous amount of houses in the poorer communities. First-time home buyers who went under, they tore their houses down instead of selling them. A lot of times they said it was too much to fix them up and so on and so on. We don't get those loans that were necessary to go in and rehab a house from the banks, by the way. Black people generally only get it. I'm going to use the term black people. They get loans for finished products, not restoration products, because a lot of times the banker would not give that type of loan to them because they'll say, you don't understand what restoration is. You may not have the people necessary to do the restoration. You don't have a plumber to go in there. You don't have an electrician. Even the builders who are going from, building stick builds now are struggling with the cost of material. A 250-foot roll of copper wire, 12-2, went from $170 to $150, $200. Price of copper is a 10-year high. So those are why we don't get the restoration properties. And again, it's more money to tear down and rebuild and leave lots vacant than it is for us to be able to go in there and say, give me the house for $1 and let me work on it. They don't want that to happen. And then you got to get the permits from City Hall. There's a multitude of factors that go into it, but that's where that college degree becomes an issue. How many tradesmen do we have in our community? HVAC, plumbers, electricians, laborers who know how to put on a roof, how to build a wall? Do we have drywallers? Do we have finished painters? All of those things are what we need in order to do restoration on a home. And that's what a lot of times we're lacking, and the capacity to do it because of the years of keeping us out of those industries that would allow us to get the skill sets to become fourth and fifth generation of those laborers and carpenters and tradespeople.
Yes. And, something else that you're pointing out is just having access to an asset. When you have that house and it's fully paid for, it is an asset. When you're paying a mortgage, it's really not an asset, it's a liability. But I think the real important thing is that we have knowledge and understanding about all of those things that you have mentioned. You talk about having all these different trades people and so forth and so on. Well, that's all a part of an economic infrastructure that involves business, entrepreneurism, services, and products that empower people. But we don't think in those terms. What we're thinking about is what Hamptonio was talking about earlier, and that is, go get a job. And when we go get that job, we connect ourselves to a paradigm of debt. But right now, we're in a very pivotal point in the economic history of this country. And we have so much opportunity right now to be a part of the transfer of wealth that is taking place. We're seeing a situation where the U.S. dollar is rapidly losing value. We're seeing inflation, as you mentioned, the cost of that plywood, the cost of that copper, all these things are going up in price. And if you're stuck at the wage that you're getting right now, you're not going to be able to keep up with the inflation. So we have to develop a relationship to this transfer of wealth that comes as a result of knowledge of how things work, knowledge of how the banks have really just been pimping people for years, how the banks right now are capitalizing on this wealth transfer, and you can either be in the game or out of the game. So could you talk for a few moments about what we can do to empower folks economically through financial literacy and understanding?
Well, one of the biggest thing, and I'm glad you brought that up, financial literacy and understanding. It starts with the concept of who's gonna help me build with my dollar. I mean, who's gonna really offer that, and how can I use that dollar to rotate back to me as well? And I tried to get the legislature here to let us use the dollars from our lottery losses in poor neighborhoods and let it go back in a different ratio that we were getting. And we were getting once you analyze it, we were getting such small returns from our losses of the lottery, and where it was going to benefit these other communities, our losses, not our wins, but our losses. If we win, we generally want to move. That's what, we want to move on out. But if we lose, we just have to stay right in that same community. So I wanted to take the losses and bring them back. So we have to look at how the processes are taking money out, and how can we stop that flow of that money going out. And if you think of what you just mentioned about the concept of wealth, we have wealth every day in our community that arrives in the morning, they pick it up, and they take it out every afternoon, every evening. And those are the construction workers. They drive in their pickups. They drive out in their pickups. But they're making Davis-Bacon wages. They have unions that came in and said, we will not let this project go up unless you pay the worker this amount of money. And those things to help protect them. So we have to organize ourselves to actually be set to capture that labor, capture that money from our community. But the biggest thing as an individual, I always say, you have to be willing to say, I have control. I don't have to be at the mercy of whatever is going on in life. I have control of my dollar. Because when it's in your hand, that's the biggest decision you got to make. How do you use it when it's in your hand to profit you? And you mentioned about negotiating. I just went and bought a TV from Target. I bought the TV 15% less than it was on the sticker. Because I asked the guy, I said, man, let me get this TV cheaper. That's all I told him. And he looked at me and he's like, see, I want this TV cheaper. And he said, well, I don't know if I can do that. I said, well, bring me the guy that can. Let me know if he can do that. Go get the manager of the electronics department. Guy came out and gave me a better price. We have to be willing to ask, too. Open our mouth. I think he mentioned it earlier. We got to be willing to negotiate. If you don't Find the right one. Everybody don't need that profit. And some people are needing of just making a sale. Find the one that needs to make the sale. Negotiate. Those are things that we can do every day that'll save us nickels and dimes. Count your pennies and the dollars will follow. That's what I've always been told.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
Well, they're not going to volunteer to give it to you for a cheaper price, even though if they do sell it to you for a cheaper price, they're still going to make money. But they're not going to volunteer to give away potential profit. But on the other hand, they would rather have a sale than a non-sale. So that's when the negotiation comes into play. And that is because you are an educated consumer. And that's really the best kind of consumer in a market that exploits consumers all the time. So it's all about awareness, and these are the things that we should be sharing with folks. As a senior, you can walk into Denny's and get 5 or 10% off your meal because you're over the age, over a specific age. But if you don't say anything, they're not going to say, "Hey, how old are you? Are you 67 years old? Well, we can give you 10%." They're not going to do that. They're not going to shoot themselves in the foot. So you make a very valid point. Time is dwindling on us. We have just a couple minutes, and I just want to give you an opportunity to let folks know how they can connect with you and take advantage of the information that you're sharing with folks there in Minneapolis and around the world.
Well, you can always reach out to me, just straight up email. My first and last name, LennieChism @gmail.com, LennieChism@gmail.com. That's the easiest way most time because I rarely answer the phone. I get too many calls as it is sometimes. But the email is the quickest way. And you can go find me on Facebook. If sometimes I can, it depends on how I friend people on Facebook too. But that's the easiest way. Just send me an email. Okay. And the reason I think that's the easiest way is because I know I'm always checking. The other ones, you might not get the call back in time. But generally Facebook is something that's more exclusive. And you run out of, friend requests you can accept. But the email seems to be really good. And the other piece is that you can always listen to the radio show. I'm not the host every week, but KMOJ.FM.com is called Financial Fitness. Comes on every Wednesday, our time here in Minneapolis at 6:00. And I'll host that periodically as well, too.
Okay. Great to hear that. Brother Hamptonio, did you have a parting question or comment?
Just a quick comment. As I listen to our issues as black people in this country, it always come back around to me is culturally sound. We would understand those things and know those things and do it automatically if we was culturally sound and thought about the common community, the common good for the greater number. So that's the meat of our problems, and that's what I try to get us culturally sound.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, and I'm in full agreement and alignment with you there. It is just so important for us to be connected with our culture and to embody the things that our culture stands for. And within that is the respect that will allow you to deliver good customer service as a business person, but also as a customer who can appreciate what's happening on the other side of things. As we wind down, I just want to remind folks once again that you can become a sponsor of this radio program and contribute to the economic success of this community. Reach out to Brother Stephen E. Boyd at 216-526-1297. That's 216-526-1297. We have some great businesses out there that are doing things in our community, and we are also mindful that it is very necessary for us to develop black philanthropy. I don't know how many $1 trillion flow through our hands every year. We have one of the largest economies on the planet. We have an economy that eclipses the economies of several countries in this world, but we do not take advantage of those dollars that flow through our hands. So we've got to learn how to make better choices, better decisions, and create better outcomes with the money that we spend in this world. I want to thank our engineer, Tristan Sanchez, for making us sound good today. And I want to thank you for listening. I also would like to remind you that you can check us out on Facebook, 360 Info Network, and our website, 360infonetworkradio.net. And you can get more insight and information about what we're doing here on AM 1490 WERE. Until then, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your best day. Peace.
Peace. Peace.